Hey, remember when we got a fully voice acted, fully animated new Pokemon game on Switch with vibrant graphics and environments that the Pokemon actually interacted with, included unique animations, and none of y'all bought it? If I look a little extra tired, it's 'cause I am. A lot of us bought it, and a lot of us played it, and a lot of us enjoyed it, but a lot of people didn't buy it. Until Pokopia, new Pokemon Snap was our strongest spinoff for sure. And I think we need to give it the credit that it deserves. It's so good, I actually made my husband play it for a more unbiased take, so stick around to the end of the video if you want to see what he thinks. He put a couple hours into the game and wrote up a reaction for us. So yes, I exaggerated when I said nobody bought it. Yes, plenty of people bought it and loved it, but it does feel like everybody forgot about it. And I've been thinking about this game a lot recently as more and more discussions over the years have cropped up about all the ways that Pokemon needs to modernize. Everyone agrees we need voice acting. So many scenes in Legends EA would have hit so much better with voice acting. Even Story of Seasons introduced voice acted cutscenes. Like, come on, Game Freak. Not every conversation needs it, but the cinematic cutscenes really do. While we've gotten Pokemon in the overworld before, they're usually not interacting with the world in any kind of meaningful way. They kind of just spawn and walk around in circles. They look more like wandering animation models than something that's really living in that world. And I think Legends Arceus did this pretty decently, but that decent is probably the closest we actually got. But those wandering animations were particularly true for Let's Go and Scarlet and Violet and the wild area of Sword and Shield. ZA's models did look pretty good, but they do not have the life that new Pokemon Snap has. The Pokemon jump, they swim, they eat, they interact with things that you throw to them. They will change their behavior based on items that you hit them with or put near them or other Pokemon that they get next to. You can trigger different behaviors just like you are observing real animals. The game encourages you to interact with them in these new ways. The big elephant in the room here is that this game was not developed by Game Freak. It was fully in the hands of Bandai Namco. You had a different studio with lots of experience bringing in fresh ideas and clearly putting their all into it. But that could also explain why we never got any kind of expansion pass or DLC past one little update, despite it being a prime candidate for something like that. It has to be a little humbling when an outside studio made your world more beautiful and engaging than you had in years. And yet we haven't seen Bandai Namco on another Pokemon project since. That could be for a number of reasons, obviously. But the juicy, dramatic reason could be that they essentially made Game Freak look lazy and pretty behind on the times. It does feel like this title got dropped like a hot potato once it was released, despite it being infinitely expandable. I believe the last time we had an outside development team before Pokopia was Brilliant Diamond and Shining Pearl, but that's kind of its own disaster. New Pokemon Snap just doesn't seem to come up in discussions about modern Pokemon games, and I think it should. Though I kind of hate to compare it to the other two because they are just so different, but they both have cozy elements to them, and they would both appeal to a similar audience. That's not to say I don't somewhat understand why the game has kind of been a little bit forgotten. The game really only could live on if it was supported by expansion passes and DLC, because it's not a particularly huge or long game. The actual story is pretty quick to beat. Without new courses, the replay value just isn't really that massive unless you take long breaks in between. Like, if you remember exactly where all the Pokemon that you need to photograph are, it's not gonna be fun to play only like a couple months later. Well, I find it comfortably repetitive. It is, at the end of the day, repetitive. At the time of release too, a lot of people didn't feel like that full price tag was justified, at least compared to the amount of hours you actually got out of this game. Even now, its pre-owned price, at least from what I could see online on GameStop, was $45, which I think is way too high. I think this game should have launched at $50 new. not be $45 pre-owned. And that's really just because of the short runtime, unfortunately. It has nothing to do with quality. So I realized pretty early on while writing this script that even if I tried to do an honest revisit of the game, I'm always going to be just a little bit biased because not only am I nostalgic for the N64 game, I also know that I fit perfectly into the target audience for this one. Instead, I recruited some help from my husband, Denny, to play this for the first time. He was a kid who never played the N64 version, and he is not a cozy gamer at all. He's newly returned to Pokemon series as of Scarlet and Violet after stopping at Gen 4. Now he's played Scarlet and Violet, he has played Arceus, and he has played ZA, and currently he is really deep in the post-game of Pokemon Leaf Green. The love of a good woman really will bring you back to Pokemon. Now take it away, Denny!
Denny, what are you doing eating? We gotta film the video.
Oh, shit. I guess I get to eat next week. Hi, I'm Denny.
I got him.
So first off, thanks for watching my amazing wife's YouTube channel. Please give her a like and subscribe if you haven't already done so. For a very brief bit of context about me, I'm a lifelong fan of Nintendo games, including Pokemon. When new Pokemon Snap was released, I had been on a hiatus from actually playing Pokemon games for a while, but I was always aware of both mainline games and larger scale spin-offs as they were coming out. With that in mind, I probably should have heard there was a new Pokemon Snap coming out. I was an active Switch user at the time. I know I was feverishly following the development of Metroid Dread, which came out later that same year. And I remember being intrigued by the announcement of Pokemon Legends Arceus. Arceus or Arceus?
It doesn't matter.
Okay, Arceus, which was announced about a month and a half before this game's release. This is all to say, I hadn't heard of this game at all until Bridget told me about it years later. More evidence that Nintendo fumbled their marketing a bit here. So I got my hands on this game for the first time just this past week, and let me tell you, I've never seen Pokemon look so great. It's a casually gorgeous game, with a smooth 60 FPS and a fully rendered naturalistic 3D models. Obviously all of the actual snapping sections look amazing, but I really also appreciate how dynamic the cutscenes are, and how even the little talking head sections consistently have beautifully rendered 3D Pokemon casually moving around in the background to add some flavor, without impacting the performance at all. But that's some good proof that Pokemon games can truly look excellent, even if they haven't lately. Something I really hope they can pull off again with Wind and Waves. The playstyle is very true to the original Pokemon Snap, but I also love how much it adds. Things like day and night versions of courses, or the ways that a level will evolve and have additional elements added on replays. It's things like that which differentiate this as a full-fledged, fully modern game. I enjoyed the original, but it always felt more like a gimmick of sorts, more of a curiosity than a game, if that makes sense. The added elements in this newer Pokemon Snap define it as a far deeper experience. There are some areas where this game's adherence to the original game style leads to some of the same frustrations from the original game. The biggest for me will always be the subject of a picture. Now, I'll always find what defines the subject when there are multiple Pokemon in a picture as a somewhat unintuitive system. Often, I'll have my camera's targeting reticle focused far more on one Pokemon than the other, but that other Pokemon is then defined as the subject of the photo. For example, at the end of the first night level, there's a Scorbunny snoozing on top of a Torterra. It's adorable. But it did seem way more finicky than it probably should have been to get the Scorbunny as the subject of the photo instead of the Torterra. It seemed like the subject designation would stick to the Torterra, even after I'd trained the camera directly on Scorbunny for several seconds, and it robbed me of some really nice Scorbunny shots in the final tally. Then, there's the Emolga incident.
I will always be mad about this.
While trying to take a picture of a Wurmple, just by luck, I happened to get a perfect shot of a flying Emolga's stupid smiling face filling the frame the moment that it went by. It was incredible. Bridget and I both cheered out loud when it happened. But not only was it defined as a Wurmple picture in the final tally, I couldn't even select it because the subject, Wurmple, wasn't visible. Look at this! Imagine showing this picture to a professor and being told that, instead of the best picture of an Emolga he'd ever seen, that it was a terrible picture of a Wurmple. It makes me want to say a lot of words that I shouldn't say on YouTube. And some might say, Denny, that Emolga picture took no skill at all. It was complete luck. You shouldn't have been rewarded for it. I answer, this isn't Elden Ring. It's Pokemon Snap. I don't need to have a withering, punishing system to ensure I can't get a lucky picture once in a while. I'm mostly being facetious here, but if I was a little kid playing this, I guarantee you I would have thrown my controller across the room and probably not picked up the game again for a week, if at all, after this kind of incident. And that angry little kid is, of course, the audience Nintendo is primarily marketing to here. That said, solid chance this was more of a wonky hitbox issue than some intentional picture subject programming decision. Doesn't make me less mad, of course, but it's a more understandable, if unfortunate, issue. When it comes to other stressors in this game, some are more intentional and can add an interesting sense of tension in themselves, although some of that may be due to my own personal approach as a Pokemon photographer. For example, while you're taking a picture facing one direction, it can be slightly overwhelming if you're constantly worried about everything that could be happening off screen that you're missing. Now, this is mitigated somewhat by the replayability, and it overall gives a good sense of urgency and challenge once you're used to it, but it can cross into frustrating territory. Like, I'm taking this time to line up an excellent shot, but what if, Lugia just flew up behind me and I have no idea? This is part of the original game's gameplay loop, of course, and it continues here. It can occasionally cross into frustration, especially if there's an ill-timed scan alert or an ally pop-up that distracts you while you're already overwhelmed, but it does add spice to the game, and unlike the subject issue, is clearly supposed to be part of the experience. The scanning mechanic, particularly the way that it provokes the Pokemon within range, I actually find to be a really solid little addition to the gameplay. You can always settle for the fine shot, but if you do the scan to surprise the Pokemon and make it run, it gives you a much narrower window. It gives you a much narrower window to get a much better photo. It's a great way to give a little self-imposed challenge that can enrich the experience, and it's something I found myself doing often. In general, I like how much this game is dependent on your personal buy-in, which is just a perfect way to do a game like this. You can go as intense with it as you want, and always try to get the most artsy and dynamic photos. You can go purely for points, even if it means selecting a less appealing photo, or you can just totally embrace getting particularly cute, silly, or cool photos. As I mentioned earlier, part of new Pokemon Snap's strength is how many extra touches they add to make it feel like a more complete, modern game. That said, not everything about modern game design is ideal. Occasionally, some symptoms of modern game design syndrome rear their ugly head. This includes the extremely detail-intensive and repetitive tutorials in the beginning. I liked how the original just dropped you right into things with a camera and a little pep talk from Professor Oak and just let you figure it out. Whereas I feel like new Pokemon Snap is constantly teaching me new things about itself. This is just one example of this overall sense that things need to be explained rather than discovered. Now, this is certainly not a phenomenon unique to Pokemon Snap. It might be the biggest symptom of modern game design syndrome in general, but it definitely does impact this title. For example, I would have liked to find an Illumina Pokemon before the Professor and Rita started yapping about it. It would have been very cool for a Pokemon in a night level to suddenly start glowing, and this whole breathtaking reveal of these strange phosphorescent Pokemon treated as an intriguing mystery for me to figure out. Instead, the Professor and Rita just casually mentioned the phenomenon in dialogue during a talking head before I even saw one, and it took away some of the majesty and the mystique before they actually came up in the game. Those nitpicks aside, I really enjoyed New Pokemon Snap as a completely sumptuous showcase for the Pokemon setting with gameplay made to directly highlight that visual appeal. It is unabashed eye candy, and it is fantastic in that sense. I would love to see Pokemon take some of that design philosophy and put it into their mainline games, at least as much as physically possible considering the size of those games. That's one of the reasons I'm so excited to hear that Wind and Waves is a 2027 release instead of a 2026 one. It's a sign that they're taking their time to deliver a truly polished product, without resorting to cutting corners or, worse, developer crunch. If a full-scope mainline Pokemon or a Legends game managed to have even 75% of new Pokemon Snap's visual splendor, it would be absolutely remarkable.
Guys, thanks for joining me on Bridget's Never Played. Next week we have something really fun. Danny and I are actually going to New York City, and we will be going to Nintendo New York to do a little shopping at the Pokemon Center store. So if you like that idea, make sure you click that sub button, and I will see you next week.